Hey there, guys. So, received a question about how do I train. Um, Put simply, I'm not going to be able to sum it up in a short video. I've been training for nearly 14 years, or competing in powerlifting for nearly 14 years. So, how I train and go about things is going to be vastly different compared to how I program and write programs up. For example, for my online clients, it's completely different. For me, having said that, I try and typically stick to 4 sets of 10 of a exercise, and I really limit my exercises down to pretty much four. So the four movements that I keep in my program pretty much at all times are the front squat, bench press, overhead press, and neutral grip pull-ups. Everything else, assistant movements, I rotate them through depending on where my weakness is. If you look at those four exercises, you'll find one thing is common. They require back for every single one of them. So, front squats, obviously, if your upper back or mid back is weak, you're going to collapse forward under load. If your deadlifts, for your deadlifts, if your back is weak, you're never going to be a great deadlifter. So I try and not do deadlifts until I get into my competition block. Um, Overhead press, same thing again. When you press weight overhead and you're holding it, so I do the standing overhead press. Your scapula have to, well, I retract them and I keep them in position. But then, the isometric contraction to keep your scapula stable requires so much back in order to do it properly. So then again, it pretty much turns into an assisted back movement or development exercise. Bench press, same thing again. Retract your scapula, slightly depress them. Again, you're using your back to hold everything in position isometrically. So front squat, bench press, overhead press, and then obviously neutral grip pull ups. Well, obviously pull ups you're going to work a lot of back. Um, the reason I stick to 4 sets of 10 is I found that is a good amount of volume. From there, I can, go and work on whatever else needs, work. For example, like if I do bench press, I might do my 4 sets of 10 and go, what, my shoulders just felt weak and tired. You know what, I'm going to focus a little bit more energy on, overhead pressing or developing shoulders in another manner. Front squats, I might do them and go, oh, look, quads didn't feel like that they were firing really well. I might do a few more sets. I might do some normal squats. I might do paused squats. I might do lunges. I might do belt squat. It really depends on what is my weakness at that point in time. Overhead press, for example, I might be struggling with lockout, so then it comes down to a bit more tricep work. It really depends on where your strength and weaknesses are at that point in time. I think with those four exercises that I've mentioned, you cover pretty much everything you need. The other thing that I also throw in again is the stones. Uses a lot of abdominals, mid, lower back. You even use your arms, biceps to sort of lock the stone to place as you're pulling it up. Same thing goes for pull ups as well. Use a lot of bicep and general arm involvement. Um, that's how I pretty much train. I don't have anything set, and I just work on what needs to be worked on to get stronger over time. I find a lot of people really neglect recovery, makes a massive difference. Nutrition, big difference as well. Definitely sleep makes the world of difference. Um, Programming is completely different between off season and pre powerlifting season and then comp prep. So it's probably easier to start in the off season. I just work on general conditioning. I'm trying to get fitter, healthier, work on mobility to an extent, not through stretching, but just through, say, for instance, when I do my front squats and pauses, I really try and hit a little bit more depth. I might take a wider stance. I just work on anything that's mobility related to the big three that I need to do in competition. Bench press, I might go higher rep. Just higher reps. It's more my triceps that fail. So sort of conditioning in that regard. Also just getting used to general workload. If you're able to hit, in the off season, say 3 sets of 20, it carries across really well to your competition prep. If you really work on your conditioning phase, you've got more red blood cells, more oxygen in the system, you're going to recover a lot quicker. And bear in mind, I think a red blood cell has something like a lifespan of 120 days, which near enough to a 12-week powerlifting comp prep block. So, if your conditioning is really good at the start, you find you can coast through most of your comp prep really quite comfortably, up until the very end where, I'm just doing singles and my work capacity has gone down a lot. You really want to look after your health in that regard as well. I also find having the off season going with, 3 sets of 20, just gives my body heaps of time to recover in terms of, say for instance, I had a disc bulge. I don't, but if I did my heavy competition, I had a slight disc bulge. That can take 12 weeks to recover. I might as well let my body completely recover and just go high rep, work on my fitness and conditioning. If I have any underlying injuries that I wasn't aware about, I can let them pretty much heal before they even become a problem. I think trying to be strong year round is a pretty terrible mistake. You need to really start to block out your training as you get stronger and have more dedicated periods to certain aspects. I found when I was much, much younger, and not as strong, I could train more frequently. I recovered better, but at the same time, it's like the amount of weight that I'm shifting now, it's a lot more. So there's going to be more total muscle tension. My nervous system is firing more total motor units. So therefore, the CNS involvement is much greater. The portion of muscle tissue I'm using per set and rep has also increased as well. So 4 sets of 10 for a beginner might be easy, but as you get more advanced, 4 sets of 10, you're recruiting a higher percentage of your muscle fiber within that muscle tissue. So it's a lot more taxing. So I really try and keep my volume quite low, compared to bodybuilders, for example. When I do bench press, as I said, it's 4 sets of 10. I won't then go and do incline press or decline press or anything like that. I just literally keep it to bench press, and then I might go and do my overhead press relatively light because I'm pretty spent. Again, that would be 4 sets of 10. So pretty much for chest, shoulders, and tries, I've hit 8 total sets. And a training session for me for upper body when I'm doing bench press, it's literally bench press and then shoulder press, and I'm done. I'm not trying to do all these other bits and pieces that I don't need to, especially when I'm trying to ramp my strength back up. Off season, a little bit different. You might go and do a bit of a bodybuilder split, get more volume in 3 sets of 20. It's easier, you recover better. The CNS involvement's nowhere near as great. Not firing as high a percentage of your fast twitch muscle fibers, from start to finish. So it's a lot different in that regard. And you'll also find, if you just stick to your heavy compound movements, you will continue to keep the muscle mass that you have in those movements. And try and look at like the squat, bench, and deadlift, or front squat. Just look at the muscle groups that are worked and see what other exercises you have in your program which also incorporates them. So for me, pretty much every session back somehow gets worked. I don't do any direct back work apart from pull-ups. And physique wise, like I have quite a well developed back. The same thing, like quads, they're really quite strong, but I spend a lot of time front squatting when I do my squats because that's going to be my weak link in terms of the squat variation. I don't like taking the traditional back squat all the time and squatting that way because structurally I'm not really built that way. I've got sort of broader shoulders, and then my hips are a little bit more narrow. Quads grow really well for me. So from that standpoint, I may as well be a quad dominant squatter. Quads grow really well. Glutes and hamstrings take a lot more time. I'm not competing in bodybuilding, so I'm not going to try and really grow glutes and hamstrings to huge potential. Like if I was doing back squats and they grew, then obviously, it'd be a muscle group that I'd consider working more on to help. But the fact that I use so much quads when I squat and have a slight lean forward and keep the stress there, and I can stay stable. I just keep using front squats as a tool that works really, really well. Um, that's pretty much it for this video. I'll probably do a few where I talk about how to program for bench press and how to program for squats, because that's, an art in itself. And again, just because of how long I've been training compared to other people, things are going to be vastly different. But the take home message would be pretty much stick to 4 sets of 10. The exercises that I'd really, really encourage would be bench press, overhead standing press. I don't care if it's like a barbell or dumbbell, but just keep it standing. Because as soon as you're using one of those, incline, decline benches, when you can lay on the bench and sort of relax your upper back, you're just robbing yourself of, extra growth potential that you need from a stability standpoint. So yeah, I said bench press, overhead press, front squats, I find are far superior to traditional back squats. And then the neutral grip pull-ups, just because I find that works really well for the upper body as a whole. You'll probably also notice that bench press, overhead press, and then the neutral grip pull-ups, I've got 3 predominantly for upper body and then only 1 lower body exercise. But when you think about it, it's like, what gives out? It's always going to be your smaller muscle groups. It's always going to be your upper body. Because people, when you fail a squat, or at least for me, when I fail a squat, I doubt it's ever going to be my legs. Like, you look at your legs and you walk on them all day, you run, sprint, you look at just how big your legs are compared to your arms, and it doesn't ever really make sense to me that your legs would fail on a squat. I just really can't see that happening. I can see your abs and lower back giving way under load, but I can't ever really see quads or hips giving out on a squat compared to abs and lower back, because they're so much smaller. And that being said, if you can keep your chest up and your back tight when you're lifting significant load, you should have a far, far better chance at being successful. So as a whole, I just structure everything more towards upper body development, especially with the big compound movements, and then only throw in the front squats to really hit the quads hard, because I think the quads are probably the most beneficial for me in terms of how I squat, compared to a program that heavily utilizes, say for instance, belt squats. Like, if you go and do a whole lot of belt squats, yeah, you're going to really grow your quads. You take a really wide stance, you can hit a lot more glutes and hamstrings. But if your lower back and core are weak, well, you're just going to fold under weight. Like, guess what? Your squat really didn't improve that much. Go and work on your lower back and abdominal development. Oh, your squat went up. Like, it's not really going to be your legs that are going to give out, or at least in my case, my legs are not going to give out on a squat. I'm just limited to basically what my back and core can hold. So probably take that in mind, especially think about it, from a sprinting perspective and the amount of power that you can generate sprinting. Like, if your legs were weak, you wouldn't be able to sprint at a high pace. So, that's probably something else, a little bit more food for thought. If you guys have any questions, comment below and I'll try and get back to them in a video form and explain in a little bit more detail as I've been asked to do. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. If you guys can, just hit like and subscribe, makes a big difference, or drop a comment, because that also really helps me out. Apart from that, guys, have a great day, and until next time.